You asked, they delivered. The K7XX from AKG and Massdrop is back with memory foam ear pads, a detachable cable, and premium sound for all-around listening. Receive a free Massdrop mini mic if you order through the link below in the next 2 days. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're taking a look at a brand new case from NZXT. This is their H700i as part of their new H series of cases. This is actually the flagship model at $200 US. MSRP. It is pretty steep. It's actually one of the more expensive cases I've taken a look at in recent months, to be honest, but it does come jam-packed with a ton of features some of you guys might find pretty interesting, so we'll be taking a full look at all of that today. This is a mid-tower ATX, actually up to eATX motherboards are supported, and the build quality, first off, I just want to talk about the exterior here, is built like a tank. We've got full metal and glass construction for the most part, everything from the front and top panels to the side, the tempered glass side panel here. Absolutely looks fantastic and really just feels rock solid. There is a metal side panel on the left as well that has a quick release latch, a button on the back side, which drops it down. I did not realize that when I first took it out of the box and tried to pry the side panel off with my bare fingers and actually ended up snapping off one of the plastic latches. So shame on NZXT for using plastic for that latch, and shame on me for being an idiot. Additionally, this also kind of gives a unique look to the case, all these sort of ventilated holes here. That is full-on ventilation. There is no dust filtration behind these holes, with the exception of the front. There is a dedicated dust filter that covers the 3 included Air F120 fans. You also get an Air F140 at the back with flexible mounting strips. You could also slot in a 120, it looks like. Additionally, you can take the top panel off and that'll reveal radiator mounting to get up to 280 or 360 either at the front or the top, so plenty of water cooling options. For front I/O, we've got audio and headphone jacks, 2 USB 3, 2 USB 2, and a power button with a LED around it. There is no reset on this case, be aware. And it's got a very nice sort of minimalistic look, very akin to the S340 in some ways. Of course, everyone's gonna have their own opinions on what looks better, this or that. You guys let me know in the comments below what you think. Additionally, on the back side here, we do have a reservoir mount, which is pretty cool. That would go right in front of your graphics cards. There's another one on the very iconic blue bar that now kind of goes over the power supply shroud. And then additionally on the back, we have a removable PSU bracket. So you would actually insert that unit from behind. Also, as you can see, this case is lifted off the floor with the 4 rubber feet. That's about gives you about an inch of clearance, so you don't actually suffocate the power supply at the bottom, which if you mount it fan down, you do get a dedicated dust filter for that. Slides in and out very easily and securely. It also feels high quality even though it is made of plastic. Now, in addition to all this, one of the top selling points that NZXT's really been trying to drive home with this case is the integrated RGB lighting. There's actually a strip that's pre-built in right at the top. They include an additional strip that you can place wherever in the case, and that connects to an integrated built-in smart hub, which kind of acts like a Grid Plus and a Hue Plus, so it gives you fan control and RGB lighting control functionality in one small device. That actually is mounted behind the top portion of this blue bar here. We're going to take a closer look at that, but that's really interesting because it actually uses machine learning in order to give you a custom tailor-made fan curve based on your system thermals and noise levels, which is pretty sweet. So whether all of this adds up to being worth $200 remains to be seen till the end of the video. But for now, let's go ahead and crack this guy open and start building inside of the H700i. All right, so here we are taking a look at the inside for the first time. You'll notice that we have pre-installed standoffs, which is great for an ATX motherboard, which we'll be using today. No rubber grommets on this end of the case. You can see there's just a really wide cutout here where you can route your cables. So not exactly sure how that would look unless you had like a radiator or some fans here to block out that cabling. Not sure exactly if it would look messy or not, but you don't get any rubber grommets. The right side gets a pass because it just has this huge cable routing bar that you could pretty much just pass cables underneath and you wouldn't really see where they're coming out of from the motherboard tray anyway. But let's just go ahead and mount our ATX board in here. We're rocking a X299 system today. I've already sort of prepped the motherboard in the interest of time. I/O panel has already been installed. In we go. This is the Gaming Pro Carbon AC X299 board from MSI with a 7960X, I believe. That's a 16-core, 32-thread part for those of you interested. And I like how the middle standoff is a little bit raised, so it just helps you get aligned that much easier. All right, our motherboard is installed for the most part, and since we've got an AIO here, also courtesy of NZXT, we're going to actually mount this to the top. Now, before we change angles here, you'll also notice that you get a nice look at our built-in RGB strip here. And as I mentioned earlier, NZXT also includes another flexible strip for you to mount anywhere else in your case. And you can see you can connect it right here. But more on that later. Let's get this radiator installed. So you guys are looking at the top of the case right now with the top panel removed, of course. And we've actually got some flexible mounting strips, once again, for up to a 280 or 360 millimeter radiator. This bracket, this whole black bracket, is actually removable. First off, it's made of steel, very sturdy. It's got 4 thumb screws here, which are incredibly tight out of the box. So you'll need a screwdriver at first to let them loose. And once those are removed, this bracket seems to just pop out like that. Wait one moment while I fix this to the radiator. Yes, I know I'm putting fractal venturis on an NZXT AIO, sue me. I like to be incestuous sometimes. Don't quote me on that. That can be taken out of context way too easily. So this would go in like so. Righteous. So it looks like the only way to route these to the back of the motherboard tray is just underneath or to the right of the radiator through the actual bracket, which doesn't seem like the most elegant mounting solution or routing solution, but it does seem to be covered by that blue cable management bar. So I'll just route these over here for now. I'm not going to plug them in just yet. We'll get around to that. Power supply mount is fairly straightforward. We got 4 thumb screws, which will remove this bracket. Then you fix the bracket to the power supply, and in everything goes from the back side of the chassis. Looks like these are captive as well. 1 little, 2 little, 3 little PSUs, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little PSUs. In go the cables, followed by the power supply. And we have nearly an infinite amount of power supply clearance, as you'll see in just a moment. But let me get this guy screwed in. Now you get quite a few mounting options for SSDs, or 2.5-inch drives rather, inside of this case. First off, you've got a mounting point right here. These are all removable trays. So you get 1 right here and 2 on top of your power supply shroud, as well as 2 more behind your motherboard tray, which we'll take a look at later. But this is actually pretty cool. These are fully toolless, so there's a little bar here that you push down on, and that just kind of easily releases the tray. You'd obviously need 4 screws to mount the SSD to the tray, but putting it back is also a breeze. You kind of just push down like that, and it goes back into place. It gets even cooler on top of the power supply shroud. So all of these ventilation holes actually serve as a sort of mountable grid where you can actually place these trays anywhere on the grid. And I should also mention that they're fairly sturdy. Once they're locked in, they don't wiggle around at all. You can even mount it this way. Mount it horizontally, like that, if you wanted to. You could remove 1 or both of them. It's actually kind of fun. It's sort of like building with Legos in a sense. And additionally, you also get some routing holes behind those trays for your SATA cables. There's also a mounting hole behind this cable bar right here if you were to mount a drive to this tray here. We only have 1 SSD that's going in this system. I say we mount it to this one because I'm kind of curious as to how the routing goes from behind this bar. Hopefully we don't have to remove the bar in order to get the cables over here. So I was gonna mount this and actually wire it up right now, but it seems that in order to get access to the cable routing hole behind this bar, you kind of need to remove the drive cage that's underneath this power supply shroud. So why don't we take a look at the drive cage first, and then we'll come back to mounting this SSD. So here's a look at the drive cage. It can support up to 2 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives, and it looks like we've got some thumb screws here, which if you undo, you can remove the drive trays individually for easy mounting. They are steel. This is a huge plus. A lot of times drive cages get overlooked, and the manufacturers cheap out on materials using some really thin plastic and things like that. But these look very sturdy. Happy about that. Additionally, you might notice that this entire cage can be removed, so it's fully modular. The cooler part, however, is that the cage itself is mounted onto these rails, so that if you loosen the 4 screws at the bottom of the case, you can slide this entire cage all the way front or all the way back to give you either more clearance for a radiator at the front or more cable routing room for your power supply, etc. So that's actually very flexible. In fact, I'm going to remove my drive cage entirely. We need, like I said earlier, access to that cable routing hole for our SSD at the front of the case. Drive cage is fully removed. So now I'm going to try to pass our SATA cable. All right, there we go. And now for our power cable. All right, it seems like it's actually pretty easy to get those cables routed through that hole, even though it is relatively small. Flipping it around to the other side, you can now see we've got the necessary connections for our SSD. I'm gonna plug those in first, and now we can mount it back to the case. There it is, super clean looking actually. Love the way that works out. So guys, just bear with me a moment. I'm gonna route all of our front panel connectors to the motherboard, which shouldn't take me too long. I should also mention that this case has two USB 2.0 front panel connectors. One's actually, I guess, not a front panel connector. It's for your smart hub. So in order for the smart hub to interface with CAM, etc., you will need to connect it to a USB 2 header on your board. So bear that in mind. In order to take full advantage of all this case's connectivity and features, you will need two USB 2 headers on your main board. As I'm wiring up this 24-pin ATX cable, looks pretty cramped up here. There's almost like no way for me to route this cable behind the side of the bar. I kind of have to route it up top of the bar, if you know what I mean, which I don't personally mind, but some people will. But if you had some sleeved extensions, maybe some fabric ones, or some paracord, for example, you'd probably be able to get away with routing it, you know, underneath this tight space. But otherwise, if you got a big bulky cable like I do right now, pretty much got to route it towards the top. I guess it would also help if you had a right angle 24-pin connector on your board as well, but clearly we don't. Now before we install our graphics card, I want to quickly point out that you don't actually need to remove this blue bar here in order to do your build, unless of course you want to do some more tidying with these cables. As I mentioned earlier, it was kind of hard to get this 24-pin underneath this portion of the bar. You can remove the bar if you want to add some more flexibility there. I think there's 3 screws, one at the top, one at the bottom, and one at the back, or actually on the side here, holding it in place. Very simple and easy to remove. Doesn't take much time at all, but you don't actually need to remove it in order to complete your build. So that's good news. Let's move on to the graphics card. We're going to be installing a reference RX Vega 64, because up until this point, the only thing I've really done with it besides the launch video and initial benchmarks is keep it in the background of my other videos as a set prop. And considering how freaking expensive and hard to find these cards are, I felt like it was a disservice just leaving it sitting there collecting dust for so long. So now we get to put it in a build. It doesn't really quite match. I don't know, it doesn't really match, but it kind of does. The contrast is kind of eye-catching to me. Very standard mounting procedure with the graphics cards here in the H700i. Get some thumb screws. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 expansion slots. Beautiful. Let's finish wiring this sucker up. Now, where should the VGA cables come from? Do we put them up from, oh, okay, so this slot here. Okay. Just doing some tidying over here, don't mind me. All right, guys, at this point, we are ready to tackle our cable management, and I gotta be honest, this case has some of the best looking cable management features I have seen in a mid-tower in quite some time. The cable channels that they've kind of pre-installed here, first of which are fully modular. So if you don't like any of this, if you don't like the design or direction that NZXT is going with this sort of style of cable management, you can remove all of it. So there's really not much to complain about in that department. But if you want to keep it around, these channels kind of give you, even if you're a first-time or novice builder, it really gives you a good idea of where these cables should be flowing and the sort of path they should be taking behind your motherboard tray. Additionally, you've got a bunch of Velcro straps to keep everything flat. That way you can actually mount your power supply, your side panel on. Additionally, we also have those 2 more SSD trays at the back. They are sort of these little trays that are mounted with a single thumb screw on each one. Very simple and straightforward, pretty familiar design that we've seen. Now I should mention the smart hub that's built in here is SATA powered, so you'll need to keep that in mind. And there are only 3 PWM 4-pin headers on that device. However, you could attach a couple splitters to it. It looks like NZXT's already done that, so you can expand the number of fans you connect to this thing significantly. So currently they already have all 4 of the included fans wired up to that smart hub, and you get an additional 1, 2, 3, 4 available connectors for 4 more fans. And we do have the 2 that we had on the AIO, which we are going to be connecting as well. Boom and boom. And continue tidying up these cables. And there it is, folks. Within about a minute to a minute and a half, we are done with our cable management for the most part, thanks to the ingenious cable routing channels that we have here. I actually think they worked quite well. This was a total no-brainer. And the only issue I would say is like when you have all the fan splitters and the fan headers, it gets a little bit bunched up in this area. Let's actually see if we can put the side panel on without much issue, just so we can verify. Now remember, I did break the top latch, one of the latches here, so it's not gonna mount flush, but that goes on just super easy. Even if this was not broken, I'm sure it would go on just fine, but that is great. That is some fantastic cable management. And not to mention, you get the power supply shroud as well, so you can hide any excess cabling under there also. Look at this. This guy, this 50/50 connector, was just chilling here. It's kind of nice to already have that ready to go out of the box. Not used to that, but it is something I could definitely get used to. I should also mention that the LED strip that they include is not only RGB, but magnetic as well, which is a huge plus. So at this point, people, we are ready to slap back on our panels and fire this up for the first time, and that way we can start messing around with our smart hub to see exactly how that works. Alright guys, so I've spent a good chunk of time in the cam software getting acquainted with the adaptive noise reduction feature that interfaces with our smart hub inside of this case. And the way it works is you open up the cam software and you go through about an hour-long calibration process. And during that time, you can't really use your system regularly. It basically just tests it for a full hour, puts it under load, tests all the temperatures and noise emissions at load versus idle, and then after that hour, cam will spit out a custom adaptive fan curve that is, in theory, going to be better suited for your system than, say, a preset fan curve. And it actually does give you a chart comparing temperatures and noise emissions from a preset fan curve versus the new adaptive curve. We actually saw a 3-degree reduction going from preset to adaptive on our CPU, going from 64 to 61 degrees Celsius, which isn't too bad, and our GPU, which is the reference RX Vega 64, dropped 5 degrees Celsius, going from 74 to 69 degrees C. Combined, we've essentially just shaved 8 degrees Celsius off of our two main components here by basically doing nothing. As far as acoustics go, going from the preset to the adaptive fan curve basically didn't make a difference. In fact, we actually incurred a 0.3 decibel noise increase. So the system got a fraction louder, even though you can't really hear it to the naked ear. But I think that's maybe attributed to the fact that we have a reference RX Vega 64 in here with a very loud blower style fan that would potentially drown out any sort of noise benefit that the adaptive fan curve might have given us. So it just goes to show that the effectiveness of this technology is really going to vary from system to system, which makes it infinitely difficult for me to tell you guys how it's going to impact your rigs at home. And that sort of just makes it even more difficult to justify the sort of premium price that is attached to this case. I can really only speak on behalf of my own data, which is that the system is now running a bit cooler, but it's still just as loud as it was before we ran that whole calibration process. At the end of the day though, this is a great case. I mean, it has a ton of great features. It's modernized for 2017, with the exception of no USB 3.1 Type-C at the front panel, which I forgot to mention earlier, but why? Why doesn't it have it? I don't understand. But other than that, it's got a ton of custom water cooling support, much more than the S340 or the H440. However, I feel like if you're not doing some heavy custom water cooling, users of the S340 or S340 Elite aren't going to be missing much with the H700i unless you really value that smart hub device and adaptive fan curve technology. Those are my 2 cents on this case. Guys, let me know what your own thoughts are in the comments below. Do you think it's worth the $200 price tag? Blow that shit up and be sure to toss a like on the video if you enjoyed it. It does help a lot. As always, guys, I'm Bitwit. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more tech stuff coming at you really soon, and I will see y'all in the next video.